Have you ever noticed how the loudest dreamers often achieve the least? There was once a young farmer named Samuel who learned the hardest truth about dreams, that sometimes the very act of sharing them is what kills them. This is his story. Samuel lived in a small village surrounded by golden fields and rolling hills. He was 23 years old, full of hope, and carrying a dream bigger than the sky above him. He wanted to create the most beautiful garden the village had ever seen, a place where rare flowers would bloom, where people could find peace, and where beauty would heal broken hearts. Every morning, Samuel would wake up with excitement rushing through his veins. His mind painted pictures of colorful petals dancing in the wind, of stone pathways leading to quiet benches, of fountains singing soft melodies. The dream felt so real, so close, that he could almost smell the roses. But Samuel had one habit, a habit he didn't even realize was dangerous. He loved to talk about his dream. At the village market, Samuel would tell the bread seller about his garden. "I'm going to plant lavender from the northern mountains," he'd say with shining eyes, "and roses that bloom even in winter." The bread seller would smile politely and nod. At the evening gatherings, Samuel would describe his vision to anyone who would listen. "There will be a fountain in the center," he'd explain, using his hands to paint the air. "Of white marble, water will flow like music." People would say, "That sounds wonderful, Samuel." Some would pat his shoulder. Others would say, "Good luck with that." Weeks turned into months. Samuel talked and talked. He told his neighbors about the rare seeds he would buy. He described the layout to his cousins. He even drew sketches and showed them to strangers passing through the village. But here's what Samuel didn't notice. While his mouth was busy talking, his hands remained empty. He never bought the seeds, he never cleared the land, he never dug a single hole in the ground. The dream that felt so alive in his words was dying in his reality. One evening, Samuel's grandmother sat beside him on the porch. She was a woman of few words, but her eyes held the wisdom of 80 years. She watched Samuel talk excitedly about his garden to a neighbor, and when the neighbor left, she spoke quietly. "Samuel, let me tell you something I learned long ago." The grandmother reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a single seed. It was small, dark, and unremarkable. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Samuel shook his head. "This is the seed of a sacred tree," she said. "My mother gave it to me 50 years ago. She told me it would grow into something magnificent, a tree so tall it would touch the clouds, with branches strong enough to hold the weight of 100 birds." Curious, Samuel leaned forward. "So did you plant it?" The grandmother smiled sadly. "No, I made the same mistake you are making now. I was so excited about this seed that I told everyone about it. I described how beautiful the tree would be. I talked about its shade, its strength, its glory. I carried this seed in my pocket and showed it to people, saying, 'One day this will be the greatest tree in the village.'" She paused, letting the silence settle between them. "But Samuel, I never planted it, because every time I talked about it, I felt like I had already done something. The praise, the excitement in people's eyes, the conversations, they gave me a false sense of accomplishment. Talking about the tree felt almost as good as growing it. So I kept talking, and the seed stayed in my pocket." She opened her wrinkled palm, showing the seed to Samuel. "50 years, my child. 50 years of talking about a dream, and look, it's still just a seed." Samuel felt something crack inside his chest. He saw himself and his grandmother's story. All those conversations, all those detailed descriptions, all that excitement shared with others, none of it had created even one flower.
"Dreams are like seeds, Samuel," her grandmother continued, her voice gentle but firm. "When you plant a seed in the ground, you cover it with soil. You give it darkness and silence. You don't dig it up every day to show people how it's growing. You protect it. You let it work in secret, beneath the surface, where no one can see." She looked directly into his eyes. "But when you keep talking about your dreams, you're like the farmer who holds the seed in his hand, showing it to everyone, explaining how wonderful the tree will be, but never giving it the soil and silence it needs to actually grow." That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind like church bells. The next morning, something changed. Samuel stopped talking about his garden. When people asked him what he was up to, he simply smiled and said, "Working on something." When his cousins asked about his plans, he replied, "I'll show you when it's ready." And then, Samuel did something he had never done before. He began to work. He woke up before sunrise and walked to the edge of his property. He chose a piece of land that got the perfect amount of sunlight. With his bare hands and a shovel, he began to clear the ground. No audience, no applause, just Samuel and the earth. He dug, he pulled weeds, he broke rocks, his hands formed blisters, his back ached, but he didn't tell anyone about it. Every day, he worked in silence. He bought seeds with the money he had saved, not the fancy seeds he had talked about, but simple ones he could afford. He planted them one by one, covering each with soil, whispering quiet prayers instead of loud promises.
Curiously, some days were hard. Some days he wanted to quit. Some days he felt lonely working in silence while others gathered and talked. But something beautiful was happening beneath the surface, something no one could see yet. The seeds were sprouting. 3 months passed. One morning, Samuel's neighbor was walking past his property and stopped in shock. Where there had once been empty land, there was now a small garden. Young flowers were beginning to bloom. A stone pathway had been laid. A wooden bench sat beneath a young tree. It wasn't finished, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. "Samuel," the neighbor called out, "when did you do all this? You never said anything." Samuel looked up from his work, soil on his hands, sweat on his forehead, and smiled. "I learned that dreams don't grow in conversations. They grow in silence and action." Words spread through the village. People came to see the garden that Samuel had built in secret. They were amazed not just by the flowers, but by the fact that he had actually done it. The same people who had nodded politely when he talked about his dream now stood speechless before its reality. And Samuel understood something profound. When you stop feeding your ego with words and start feeding your dream with work, magic happens. Listen closely. Your dreams are sacred seeds. They need protection, not publicity. They need soil in silence, not social media posts and spoken promises. Every time you talk about what you're going to do, your brain releases a little bit of dopamine, the same chemical it would release if you had actually done the thing. You feel accomplished without accomplishing anything. You feel productive without producing anything. This is why most dreams die in the talking stage. The people who change the world aren't the ones who talk the loudest. They're the ones who work the quietest. They protect their dreams like gardeners protect seeds, covering them, nurturing them in darkness, letting them take root before exposing them to the light. So ask yourself today, are you a talker or a planter? Are you holding your seed in your hand, showing it to everyone, explaining how great it will be? Or are you on your knees in the dirt, planting it where it can actually grow? Stop announcing, start
acting. Stop explaining. Start executing. Stop talking about the person you're going to become and silently become that person. Because one day, when your garden is in full bloom, when your dream stands tall and undeniable before the eyes of the world, you won't need to explain anything. Your reality will speak louder than your words ever could. Now go, plant your seed, protect it with silence, water it with action, and let the world discover your garden when the flowers finally bloom. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button. Share your biggest dream in the comments, but only if you're ready to work on it in silence. And subscribe for more life-changing stories that will transform the way you see the world. Your next breakthrough is one story away.